We're talking today about the rising fuel costs and how that's impacting budget travel around the world, because that's something that we like to do.
It makes it a lot harder to do budget travel when all the prices go up.
Yes. So today we're going to talk about what's going on with fuel prices, how things have risen, how they're continuing to rise, and some trends that we're seeing with that. And then finally, we're going to ask the question everybody is wondering about, which is
it possible to take a budget trip in 2026 with these prices?
What is happening with the fuel prices?
Most people, or at least have the idea of the conflict being an area where a lot of oil is produced, lots of choke points and everything. So basically, with all of the instability that's going on there hasn't been as much fuel that's been able to be delivered, as much oil. So that affects prices for everything, but especially for jet fuel. So they have been having fuel shortages in Asia, Europe. The prices have gone up in the US. We haven't really seen a lot of shortages, but just less of it, higher demand. But there have been several countries in Asia from several weeks ago even that began to ban exporting fuel because they were concerned they weren't going to have enough. And even some recently, Europe announced there's a concern that if things don't change, they might run out of jet fuel specifically in 6 weeks or so. If things don't change, it's a scenario that they're afraid of.
Yeah, and fuel accounts for between 20 and 40% of airline operating costs. So clearly this is a huge deal for them. Even though prices for everything across the board are rising, you can see the most direct impact with this. And, when you're looking online for flights one day and the next day there's $75 more, you start to wonder what's going on.
Well, and $75 more when it was a $200 flight to begin with is a pretty big deal.
Right.
Or $150.
That's a huge percentage.
Yeah. Flights have been changing. They've been having issues with the fuel. They've been trying to reduce the number of public transits in some places. Maybe not reduce all of it, but streamline it. They're trying to run it as efficiently as possible because you have your buses that run on gasoline. And so where's the gasoline coming from? It's all from the oil. And so the overall price is higher. There's also locations that are trimming services to try to make sure that they don't run out even.
There are some locations that are going to cost more as a result of fuel prices going up across the board. For example, islands, a lot of islands where you have to import a lot of goods like food. The price of food is going to go up because the price of getting that food to the island is going to go up.
That kind of is a segue to
how have prices risen and how are they continuing to rise?
So like you were saying, the price of oil goes up, everything goes up, right? We have to transport stuff, whether it's an island nation that imports a lot of stuff from the sea, or whether it's a city who relies on transporting stuff from other cities to come in, or from rural areas to bring in food. I mean, down to very basic things like most places in Asia and Africa, and a lot even in Europe and America, cook with gas, natural gas. And so it's not directly correlated, but in addition to oil issues, liquid natural gas and other issues that are coming from that region that are being reduced. The cost to get there, that's gone up, but then the cost of goods and services go up. These things start to cost more, then everything else starts to cost more as well.
Right. And we're seeing this especially across different airlines in the US and around the world. In the US, there are concerns that Spirit Airlines is going to have to liquidate as a result of the rising fuel prices. And we're also seeing airlines like Delta, United, and American are all raising their prices. Either they're raising the prices of their checked baggage, which makes up a significant portion of their profitability, or they're just adding a fuel surcharge of up to $60 a ticket in some cases. So that's in the States. But then around the world, especially in Europe, KLM canceled 160 flights. And then SAS, which is the Scandinavian airline, canceled 1,000 flights just in the month of April because they just don't have the resources to fulfill the flights that they booked.
We've also got Lufthansa is working on trimming down its offerings just to make sure the ones that they are flying more efficiently, so they're not wasting any finances, but also fuel.
Lufthansa has grounded its less fuel-efficient planes.
You mentioned earlier the overall cost for an airline to operate, 30% of the cost is fuel. And that hits even harder for probably the low-cost airlines because cost of the fuel is the same, but they're already reducing other costs, amenities, and maybe staffing. They're likely to have a higher percent of their budget consumed by fuel costs. So they're getting hit harder. So that's why you see like Spirit that you mentioned is having issues. And even the European low-cost airlines, we were looking at a low-cost airline a few days ago, thinking about trying to plan some travel for the fall. And one of the days had their traditional fare schedules where you have your bare bones fare where you get yourself and a small personal item. That's it. And a couple of days later, all of their flights, they had canceled that option at all. So you have to pay the higher ticket price for the whole big ticket rather than the reduced fare ones. So they just eliminated an entire fare class in response to the rising prices. It is a super dynamic thing. Like if anybody has watched the news and just seen oil prices in the past few weeks, they went way up initially and then they kind of will go up and down a lot. And so you see a lot of change in it.
Mm-hmm.
But even as we were planning our trip that we were going to take this fall, from one day to the next, ticket prices had changed significantly. And then a day or two after that, we had looked again and went up again. And so it was a pretty significant jump on a regular basis as airlines are just still reeling.
The legs that seem like they are going to continue having more issues and rising prices, long haul flights, because there won't be as much availability with oil, which really can affect the price pretty volatilely. And then also low demand flights. So like regional flights, shorter distances, smaller planes. It's just not as efficient for them to put their money into that.
So all the flights. That does bring up a very good point, though, because some of the stuff I had seen suggested the opposites.
Interesting.
That the international, specifically long-haul flights, are less likely to be impacted because they are more of a commitment. They have more of a problem if they do get canceled. And so they are more likely to try to focus on keeping those active. But there was a caveat of that with flights from the US to Europe or Asia or these other places. It could get to be a concern if there isn't fuel at the destinations for the planes to get back. So as long as there is a threat that the planes can't get back, that's when the long haul flights really have a risk. So the rest of the article I had seen on that, the multiple routes a day. So the cities that have multiple flights a day between them, those ones are likely to be cut first, which makes sense because you can just put the people from that flight to another flight a couple hours earlier, a couple hours later, and it doesn't have quite the same impact to the customer or to the business. But all of that really goes to show that nobody actually knows.
So is it still possible to travel on a budget in 2026?
It's definitely going to be challenging, but it always is. So there's a couple aspects with that, right? We've talked before about the flex method. So like your destination, the time of year you travel, and your budget. If you're flexible on at least one of those, you can make it work a lot more. So you will still be able to travel on a budget. Your budget might have to be higher.
Right.
But also it might make a big difference when you go. Looking at summer versus fall travel, which is not feasible for everybody, but I always recommend anyway, if you can travel shoulder season instead of the summer, it's usually cheaper and less crowded and often more enjoyable because of that. There's also a lot more demand in summer. And so the risk of the high demand of fuel being an issue, in a sense, could be higher in the summer. On the other hand, you have the fall where there's fewer flights, and so there might be less demand. As long as whatever fuel stockpile Europe or wherever you're traveling is going to have, as long as it's not depleted all the way by summer and then they can't do anything in the fall. But also by that time, who knows, maybe things will have gotten better, maybe choke points will have eased. It's going to be one of those situations you really have to just keep watching and decide, am I willing to pay this amount right now? Or do I want to wait and hope that things get better, but know if I do this, 2026 might not be an option?
Yeah. Most of the recommendations I saw while I was researching this from different experts was that if a flight is priced at a price point that you can afford and you're comfortable with, it's better not to wait. When you're looking at budget travel, there's always going to be, like you said, with the flex method, there's always going to be different elements that cost more or cost less, and you just kind of have to stack those against each other. So you could go into it maybe with the same budget you had last month, but just knowing that more of that budget is going to go toward your flight cost. And so that's going to affect where you stay, maybe what your food budget looks like, maybe what you're able to do when you get there. And so you might need to adjust. Well, I really wanted to go to Japan, and it's just the flight is just more than I can afford right now. So instead of doing that this year, maybe I'll do something that's a little bit closer to home, something that is a little bit more affordable once I get on the ground, because that way my budget's going to serve me a little bit better.
I don't like making predictions a lot, but I think with the current situation, the ticket prices aren't going down anytime soon because we're leading into summer, into the busy time anyway, where ticket prices would normally be going up.
Mm-hmm.
And even if all of this supply issue for the fuel were to magically fix itself tomorrow, there's still a backlog of effects from the past few weeks that has to clear out.
Right.
The costs that they've lost for the past few weeks that they have to, recoup down.
I suspect we are getting to a point where maybe we're seeing a new normal as far as ticket prices go. Maybe it won't be as extreme as where we're seeing prices at right now, but I suspect they're not going to go down as much as they had.
I don't know if I would go so far to say a new normal with it, because I feel like a new normal with it implies that, like, this is just how it's going to be. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. If the supply lines open back up, I think prices will go back to about what they have been, probably within months. I could be wrong. That's just my gut feeling on it.
Yeah. Part of me is like, if I expect that and they do go down, then I'll be pleasantly surprised. But if I expect that and they don't, then I'm not out anything.
Airfares are traditionally very cyclical in their costs anyway. And so you have this flight that might cost $1,000 one day, a couple months later it might cost $600, or a couple months later might cost $1,300. And that's very much the nature of the airline game. It's just going to be affecting the cycle depending on how quickly fuel supplies can start flowing again. And honestly, if it is a problem long enough that they start actually running out of fuel and have to start canceling more flights, then it could be a more long-term situation. If some airlines start going bankrupt, that will have repercussions long-term. But if it's not to that point where airlines have to shut down because of lack of fuel, I think we'll see the cycle swing back around. I think it'll always be changing.
So let us know in the comments how this is affecting what your travel plans are. Are there any trips that you were hoping to take that you're waiting on, or maybe some destinations you have looked into and are excited about going to because you found that they're still affordable?
Yeah, and hopefully, despite the high gas prices and fuel issues, you guys are still able to travel well.